Hey friends, thank you so much for joining me today. We're actually going to get down and dirty quite quickly. Let's talk about the books that I read in the month of March. I read 14 books this month. I feel like I may have girl bossed a bit too close to the sun, but anyway, in terms of the 14 books, let's do a bit of stats before I talk about the books. In terms of the 14 books that I read, 8 books were below 300 pages, 5 books were between 300 to 499 pages, and then just one book was over the 500 page mark. I mostly read physical books with 2 ebooks, and then I read one book that I combined the physical reading with the audiobook just because I wanted to. It added to the experience. 6 books were from my physical TBR. Another 6 books were from the library, and 2 books were from Scribd as ebooks. Out of the 6 books from my physical TBR, 3 books were on my TBR since 2020, 1 book since last year, 2022, and 2 books came onto my TBR this year in 2023. So pretty good, I think. My average rating for this month was only 3.86. I mostly read 4-star books, with 5 books being 4 stars. Sorry, I forgot my words for a second. Anyway, I read 2 5-star books, 2 4.5-star books, 2 3 and 3.5-star books respectively, and then 1 2-star book. So a pretty weird reading month, I have to say, like a bit everywhere. Let's just talk about the books. It's been a bit of a weird weekend, so I'm actually going to group the books together. That's how I'm going to go through this reading wrap up. So I've been attempting to go through the Women's Prize long list for fiction. So I'm going to talk about those books first really quickly. I'm going to steamroll through them. I'm not even going to talk about what these books are about, because my first episode of reading the Women's Prize has come out 2 weeks ago, and there'll be more coming in the next week or so, or 2 weeks I should say. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because the detail is going to be in those vlogs and it's already in the other vlog. So let's just quickly go through them. So the first book I read for the Women's Prize long list was Children of Paradise by Kamila Gradova. This was quite good. I actually quite enjoyed it. It started off so strong and I was just obsessed with it. I'd still stand by the fact that it fizzled a little bit towards the end, which just really lessened my enjoyment of it. The momentum kind of didn't quite get there, but it was really eerie, it was unsettling, disturbing, kind of a lot of bodily fluids. It was just very gothic, and I enjoy that sort of shit. I wish it was darker, to be honest, but I'm really excited to read Kamila Gradova's other works. She has, I think, a short story collection that I really want to get to, so I'm excited for that. Then I read Black Butterflies after that, and Black Butterflies is by, Priscilla Morris. It's a historical literary fiction novel. This again didn't quite hit it for me. I think that the content is very important and significant because it takes place in Yugoslavia in the early 90s when things are boiling over. But I think there was a lack of character work that did a disservice to the story. There was this random affair plot that I also think did a disservice to the story. It just needed more meat on the bones, personally. And then I read what is most likely going to be the worst book on the Women's Prize long list, and that's Pod by Lillian Paul. This was just atrocious. The story itself was atrocious. It was just not good. The commentary about the environment, environmental disasters, humans' hands in destroying our planet and habitats, important, but the story itself from the perspective of 2 dolphins, a whale, and a wrasse. Not good. It was just very not good. Watch my Women's Prize for Fiction video, episode 1, and you'll get all the tea. I hated it. Okay, there were things that happened in that story that didn't make, like, it didn't have to happen like that. Like, it, I'm getting angry just talking about it. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I absolutely hated it. I know, why was this even longlisted? I don't understand. We're not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Anyway, the next one that I read for the Women's Prize was Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow. This is a book that I'll be talking about in an upcoming episode for the Women's Prize. This was good. I gave like 3.5, 4 stars. I think the story itself surrounding 4 women, it's like a generational story. It's these growing up obviously in Memphis. They are African American. It focuses on Black womanhood and kind of their community of women, but also some things happen, specifically one thing, to one of the main characters, Joan, when she's 3 years old, by a cousin that I don't understand why that happened. It kind of felt just like writing a traumatic event for the purpose of writing a traumatic event. I don't think it necessarily did anything to the story. I don't think I enjoyed the way that situation and therefore that dynamic was approached. It needed a bit more nuance. I'm very vague because I go into more detail in my actual vlog. I don't want this to be like spoilery, but I think the focus on Black womanhood and the empowerment that they bring each other and just their strength and bravery in the story was great. And then I love how I'm gonna be really quick, I'm not gonna talk about it, but I end up talking about it. I then read The Bandit Queens by Perini Schroff. This I really enjoyed. This is also from the Women's Prize. This was really fun. It's like a kind of a murder mystery, but not really, but kind of. It's wild, it's ridiculous, laugh out loud moments. It's very entertaining, and it kind of focuses on the impact of patriarchal oppression and systemic violence against women, as well as briefly on class and castes in India. I really liked the main character, Geeta. I thought she was cool. She was both badass but naive. So a lot of she truly tries to believe the best in people even when everyone knows that they don't deserve that. So it was really ridiculous and wild, but also the commentary that takes place in it about women and women's positions, I should say, was really great. I thought it was handled well. A lot of the women are really bitchy towards each other, but I think again it's going into that complex issue of class and different castes as well as different religions. So it was really good. I do recommend it if you want a fun ride. And then my last book that I read in March from the Women's Prize was Homesick by Jennifer Croft. Now, this is about Amy and her sister Zoe, and it's essentially just Amy's coming of age, but also Amy dealing with her sister's chronic illnesses. Her sister is epileptic, and she eventually gets diagnosed with another disorder that I don't quite remember the full name, but it has lupus in the name. And this book was actually published, well, it was originally published I think in Spanish, but in 2019 it was published as a memoir, and because Amy is the author, Jennifer Croft. I think this would have worked better as a memoir. I think I actually have a copy of the memoir from the library, and the memoir includes things that the book doesn't, well, my copy of the book didn't, that I think would have made this much more, I don't know, emotionally impactful. However, what I really did love about Homesick is that it's written in kind of a different sort of way. Like, I wouldn't call them vignettes, but like fragments, but it doesn't feel fragmented. It's very cohesive narrative, and we see Amy just like growing up and loving her sister, but also wanting space from her sister, and how that causes tension, not only between herself and her sister, but also just like within herself. We see her going to college. We see her love of language because Jennifer Croft is she is a writer, but she's also a translator. So you see that coming through in the story. That's why I think it would have just been better as a memoir. But the way that the sections are structured, you have like this bold paragraph or bold sentence at the top that is like a topic sentence for the rest of the story. I mean, the rest of the section. I'm not making sense. And I really liked it. I like when books play on structure. It's like one of my favorite things. So I really liked that, and it makes it pacey and just fun. Yeah, it was fine. It was a solid book. I would read Jennifer Croft more in the future. Yes, so that's the Women's Prize books. Really quickly, let's talk about the books that I got from the library that were not for the Women's Prize. So they were, I think maybe just one. Is it just one book from the library? Yeah. Okay, so I read God Killer by Hannah Kaner. If you don't know, this book was actually one of my most anticipated books of 2023. I made a video all about it, and I really liked this. This was fantastic, exactly what I wanted. It was a fun fantasy novel. It's about, God, if I can remember the names. We have Kissen, who is a god killer. She's essentially like a mercenary assassin type thing who kills gods, and her career is now sanctioned by the king, and she comes across this young girl who I forget her name. She's a noble girl who, back in the day, a few years ago, a god attached to her, and so shit happens, and this noble girl finds Kissen, and Kissen is like, okay, we gotta figure out what's going on. If we go to the like city where the gods now stay after this huge war that happened, maybe they can help us, and we can like break this bond between you two. But on their way, they meet a knight who is a baker, but who was actually a knight for the king, and it's just kind of a found family, but like the beginnings of a found family. It's very much the first book in a series. I loved Kissen. I loved her so much. She is an incredible character. I just loved reading about her. I also loved reading about the other characters. It was just a really good time. I really recommend this. I don't know if this would make sense, but God Killer is if Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne and Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree had a baby. It's that vibe, okay? Really good, highly recommend. And then now let's just talk about the other books that I physically owned that I read. So I finally finished Possession by A.S. Byatt. This took me way longer than I anticipated, but it was so good. Oh wow. I took forever to read this. It took me like a month, I think, to read this, because it felt like reading a classic. It was so dense. Oh my god. It was so dense. And there will be just like sections of letters and journals and poetry. So it was a reading experience where you had to actually concentrate a lot of the time. Very big brain energy. What's this book about? It's about this guy who he has his PhD, oh my god, and he's now working as a research assistant for Professor Blackadder, and Professor Blackadder and our main character, oh my god, what's his name? Roland. Whoopsies. Roland and Professor Blackadder have essentially committed their lives their scholarly lives to researching a poet named Randolph Henry Ashe, or Henry Randolph Ashe, one of those. And when Professor Blackadder sends Roland to the British Library to like look up something, and Roland's like, okay, bet, let's do it. Roland finds a letter, and it's addressed to a woman, and he has no idea who this woman could be because it's obviously not the poet's wife. So he starts investigating, and what he starts to realize is maybe there is more to Ashe the poet than everyone seems to think there was. So his investigation takes him to a woman named Maud. So she's also a Victorian poet scholar, but she focuses a lot on a poet named Christabel Lamotte. And so it's essentially about these two people coming together, as well as realizing their perspective of these two poets that they kind of idolize and revere are a bit different. Like, it's different, and they have to kind of come to terms with that. But a whole other thing is happening as well. I mean, it's academia, it's cutthroat, and it's wild in a really, it's very slow though. That's my brother. It's very slow. So I really enjoyed it. I think the work that went into this, incredible. However, I had an issue with one of the characters that was represented. She was the only like openly, what would I say? Yeah, she was like the only openly queer character who like openly would sleep with men and women, and she was also the only like character, like woman of color in the story. I'm pretty sure she was biracial. I think her mother was from Africa, I believe. And not a lot of detail was spent on her character, but the way that she was represented a few times kind of got me a bit like, the fuck? She was so sexually predatory towards Maud and towards not so much to Professor Blackadder, but it's like she wouldn't take no for an answer, as though consent didn't really matter to her, and it took Maud like a few times saying no. Like, it was just very uncomfortable, and Maud constantly felt uncomfortable around her. And also there was just like these weird lines about how this woman, I forgot her name, but how this woman would like wear something, and usually this would, you know, look barbaric, but on her it didn't look that barbaric. Like those kinds of language, like that type of rhetoric, and it really, I did not like that. So, but it was written in what, the 90s, 80s, so there you go. But overall it was pretty good. What should I talk about next? Let's talk about this one. What's that? Anyway, I finally read Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I'm sorry, I didn't like it. I don't know why I didn't like it. I shouldn't say that. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. And I don't know why it was fine, because this book is a me book. But I didn't enjoy the reading experience of this at all. I didn't care about the story. I wasn't emotionally impacted at all by anything. Like, I didn't cry. I'm the easiest person to cry. I'm the easiest person to make cry, especially with reading. No, I don't know why. If you don't know what the story of Never Let Me Go is, it's about this woman named Kathy. She's kind of reminiscing about her life. She grew up in this boarding school. It was very weird, and I think it's slightly dystopian. I won't talk more about it because I think it's an entire spoiler. There's a reason why the blurb is so vague, but I knew from the beginning like what was going to happen. I knew what the twist was. I don't know necessarily if it was meant to be a twist. I don't think it was, but I just didn't care, and I wasn't interested, and I hate myself for saying that because I'm so disappointed. I honestly think that the period in which I was reading this really impacted my mood and how I connected with this story. So I do think that this might be one that I will revisit in the future, but at the moment I look at this and I'm like, you know, which is really sad because I don't want that. I loved Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. It was fantastic. Anyway, I finally read Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. It was so good. Do I have it here somewhere? I do. I'm just looking at my notes, so I apologize. But this was such a wonderful surprise. I loved the relationship between Charlie and Nora. It was so wholesome and healthy, and they were communicating really well with each other, and it was just adorable, and I loved them. I just loved this entire thing. I really connected to Nora as an older sister. I was like, yes, I get this. I get you. I understand. Because I'm an older sister, I kind of wanted there to be more drama. I wanted her younger sister, what was her younger sister's name? I don't remember her younger sister's name, but I wish her younger sister had more of a deeper realization of what Nora did for her. I wish Nora was like, no, you need to listen for a second, because I have literally sacrificed so much for you and this, and what the fuck. I wanted there to be more, but I'm petty. So that's just me talking. This was wonderful. This was so wonderful. Nora goes to this small town because her sister's like, we need a break. I'm about to give birth. I need like a little huzzah before birth, like before the birth. And Nora's like, ugh, fine, I will, because I love you and you're my sister. But it's not all, like, that's not the only reason why the younger sister wants Nora to go there, but Charlie is also there, who is her nemesis. Not really, like, they had one interaction and they were both having bad days, so I wouldn't necessarily call this an enemies to lovers. It's just like their first impressions of each other were not the best, but Charlie's there, and it was just like so cute to see how they were falling into each other, and it was just wonderful, and I loved it so much. I loved reading this. I have read Beach Read and You and Me on Vacation, and this is my favorite. This is my favorite of Emily Henry's. This is Book Lovers. I loved it. So good. Oh my god. This is one of my 5 stars of the month. Bunny by Mona Awad. I read this for my horror vlog. I loved it. I fucking loved it. I don't even know how to talk about it. I won't talk about it because you don't know anything about this book. Maybe trigger warnings, but don't know anything else about this book. Go into it not knowing anything. It's the best. It's the best. Going in not knowing anything, just if you enjoy the weird, the fucking weird, the kind of gory, the I'm so confused, what the fuck is happening, read it. Read it. It is so wonderful. It is just so out of this world ridiculous. And I talk about my conspiracy theories in my horror vlog, but I already want to reread this book so badly. And I think I might reread it around like October and like annotate it. So good. I loved this so much. I feel like I'm not being very articulate in this reading wrap up, only because I feel like I've talked about these books at other places. But oh my god, Bunny was perfect. I can't wait now to read All's Well. I know it's different to Bunny, but I really, really, really want to read more of her work. I know Mona Awad is coming out with a new book later this year. I'm there. Like, I just loved this so much. It was magnificent. Truly magnificent. It was amazing. Another amazing book. The Adventures of Amina El-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. Oh my god, this book was so good. It's about a woman who is in her 40s and she was a pirate captain, but she's like retired now because she's trying to be good. and she's been retired for 10 years. She has a daughter who she loves with all of her heart. She has like responsibilities and commitments, and you know, her family is a priority for her. She's had like multiple marriages, and she's just a legend in the game. And then she kind of gets like blackmailed and threatened into doing one last job. So she does it, and it does not go well. It's wild, it's adventurous, it is fun, it is funny. The way that this is like narrated, so good. It was so good. So good. I cannot wait to read more from this. I hope this becomes a series. I'm pretty sure it's a series. What can I say about this book without spoiling it? She gets approached by an older woman who's like, my granddaughter was kidnapped. Go and find her. Amina's like, I don't know, I'm not in the game anymore. And then the grandma's like, I can make your life a living hell. I found you, I can make everyone else find you who has wanted you for dead for years. So Amina's like, you know what? On second thought, yeah, I will actually. Yeah, I'll go and try and find your granddaughter. But her granddaughter has gotten mixed up with someone who is very not good, okay? And so it's about evil and fighting evil, and it's also about colonialism and but in like the period in which colonialism is happening. So Amina is like witnessing all this happening, and it takes place in like I don't know, medieval Arabia, like, is that what you would call it? I'm gonna say that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know the terminology, but that's Amina. Amina's a badass. I love her so much. And it also talks about like the Crusades and religion. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I loved this so much. Go and read it, please. It's fast, it's pacey. The world building is not the best, but I forgave it. It's the first book in the series. I am so excited because it kind of like left at a point where you want to know what happens in the future. Fantastic. And then the last book that I read, no, the second last book that I read actually, is one that I read on Scribd, and this was a recommendation from Ben at Ben Reads Good. I saw this book, I'm pretty sure it was in his prediction video for the Women's Prize long list, and it was Reamble by Priya Hine. Wow. Now this is only a very small book. It's my copy on Scribd was like 160 pages on my iPad. It was tiny, but more, it packs a punch. Oh fuck, it packs a punch. How would I describe this book? It's kind of written similar to Homesick by Jennifer Croft, in that you have like sections, not they're kind of chapters, but they're like fragments. They're very small, but again, it's still a cohesive narrative interspersed with like poetry and these italicized sections from women of the past, of the future, of Noemi, who's the main character herself. It's very vague and ambiguous, but gorgeous. So it follows a 15-year-old Noemi who lives in Reamble, Mauritius, and it's a kind of a coming of age, but more so a very, very confronting look into the legacy of colonialism and the legacy of trauma, not only of like the people, but also of the land. Like the city itself plays a major part in the story. It's about the violence, the systemic violence, and Noemi is kind of learning, like we are alongside her as she learns more fully the horror that befalled her people in her country. And her trying to understand her place, knowing this information, and like being able to put not a name, but like being able to articulate what's happening. So she's like given essentially the ability to understand what's like happening around her, because her teachers are like, you know what, no, like we're actually going to talk about it. It's the legacy of enslavement, and even though, you know, slavery was abolished, the systems of enslavement, it takes longer, like that institution takes longer than just it being over. It's never really over. And you see how the white people who were the colonizers and those who have stayed, and how they control the people, and it's just really, really horrible. And it was so wonderfully written. Noemi meets a boy and stuff happens, and so it just kind of pushes further this narrative of like violence and rejection because of who you are. I finished the book and it took me like a day or two. Like I was still left reeling. If you have access to it, I would highly recommend it. But trigger warnings, please look up trigger warnings. It's very intense, quite dark, but so fucking important. It truly, like, it changed something in me. I don't know how to explain it. It was so beautiful. So thanks, Ben. And my last book that I read for March, I'm pretty sure it was the last book, it's actually a short story collection, and I loved it. It's Furies, Stories of the Wicked, Wild and Untamed. It's an anthology collection. This was published this year. Yeah, it's in celebration of Virago, the publishing house, reaching 50 years. So it's a short story collection from a variety of authors like Margaret Atwood, Helen Oyeyemi, Ali Smith, Camilla Shamsi, just to name a few, Claire Coda. Like, I loved this. I loved it. I'm not saying that every story in this book is wonderful. No, there were definitely weak ones, but I can tell you my favorites. So one of my favorites was Camilla Shamsi's story, Chirail. Oh my god, incredible. Wench by Kirsty Logan. Warrior by Chibundu Onuzo. Spitfire, obviously, by Ali Smith. Fury by Rachel Seyfert. Tigress by Claire Coda, and Dragon by Stella Duffy. Siren by Margaret Atwood was also quite good. This collection is fantastic. It's every story is titled like a name that has historically been used to dehumanize and demonize women, and so it's just about women, and it's a celebration of women, but also a look into how women have been treated historically, and it was just fantastic. I loved it. I loved it. I don't know what else to say. Like, this was fantastic. And that's it. That's all I read. I'm pretty sure I read everything. That's what I read in the month of March. I had a really good reading month. Actually, I'll quickly talk about the books that I'm currently reading, just so I can send this off. I'm feeling a bit like weird. I feel like my energy is not right, but I'm about to finish The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. Very insane. Like, it's so trippy. It's as though every time you read it, it's like you take something. I'm reading Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh for the Women's Prize. Spoiler alert, loving it. I'm also making my way slowly through Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm actually really enjoying that. I know there are some things obviously that I don't necessarily agree with, but you don't really read books like this to agree with them. You read them just to engage with the ideas, like learn the way that the writer constructs his narrative. Like, Nietzsche's writing is beautiful. Did he ever write poetry? Because truly he could. He could, as if he could now, you know, because he's honestly, like, he's dead. Pretty sure he's dead. Pretty sure. I do have a brain, I promise. I love the writing. The writing really surprised me. I'm like highlighting it and underlining it like a fiend. It's insane. But that's what I'm reading. And that's what I've read. And that's the video. I hope you enjoyed. I apologize for waffling on. And also I apologize for not really talking in much detail about every book. But there'll be a video where I will talk about them. Trust me. There are going to be various video projects that will be releasing in the next month or so, where I talk more in detail about most of these books. So there you go. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. As always, subscribe if you would like. Leave a comment also if you would like. If you don't worry about it. All good, I forgive you. And have a great day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. And stay safe. Bye friends.